Kathy, will you want these back since Mr. Zetz isn't here, or will you want David to sign them tonight?
Yeah, David can sign it.
Okay, David can sign them as per Brian Zetz, yep.
Yup. All right, the recording has started.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, can you take a roll, please?
Carter. Here. Powell.
Here.
Hayes. Here.
Alrighty. Alan, you can hit it.
Okay, well, first thing I'd like to do is request that we amend the agenda a little bit here since we have an interested community member to start with resident issues, actually item 3B there. Go ahead and start with that for the night if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so this is regarding Jefferson Park Drive with Mr. Mark Shillig. The scenario here is, I'm not sure exactly when Jefferson Park Drive was installed. I think it was around 10, maybe 15 years ago. At that time, there were some issues with what the developer had done, basically a punch list before acceptance by the city. My understanding is those items were some storm sewer work, a street light, and some problems with the pavement on Jefferson Park Drive. So the storm sewer was addressed. The street light, we have been working on a solution to get that addressed. And then the final item is the paving or repairs to the pavement. Mr. Shillig is requesting that the city accept that and do the pavement repairs ourselves instead of him being responsible for what the developer should have done 10 to 15 years ago. There's more to that.
Yeah, just, first of all, if the committee would like to hear from Mr. Schilling, need a motion for him to address the committee. Second of all, Mr. Schilling has recently, I believe, purchased some of the properties back there in Jefferson Park. It's a commercial area made up of different buildings right off of Broad Street, little stub street, essentially with some private parking lots. It is something that was never completed by was never to the point where he would come to council for acceptance. I don't know what happened, it predates me as well. With this one, I know Mr. Schillig has, talked to us about it, about accepting that and getting it on the city's maintenance responsibility. So, I don't know if Mr. Schillig has anything to say, but certainly from a procedural standpoint, if he is to address the committee, should be a motion permitting him to do so.
Before we do that, I just wanna get a little more detail. So these were punch list items that were supposed to be resolved by the developer,
That is
and they
my-
were not.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I would make a motion to allow Mr. Schilling to speak before the committee.
I'll second
Sure.
I'll
Aye.
real quick,
All in favor?
who made the motion? Mel? Mel?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Mike Pat?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Schilling.
If you would like to make any comments, that'd be great.
Sure. You need name and address and all that stuff.
Yes, please.
Mark Schillig, I live at 2300 Allward Road, which is in Jersey Township, but I happen to own two properties that are in the city of Itasca that are on Jefferson Park Drive. This, for me, I don't know, I know none of you were here when this went down, and I didn't own property there when this happened, but in 2013, when whoever the owner was of Jefferson Park, or maybe it was even 2012, I guess he passed away. So I was contacted as a real estate agent from the bank that owned 6 of the properties in there. We listed them and sold most of them. At that time, there was a question about, are these condominiums, are they individual lots, are they, what's happening with the road, who owns it? So I actually myself called the engineer of Licking County, and I said, was this road ever dedicated to the city? And they said, yes, it was dedicated to the city. So we stopped thinking about that. Well, then 3 or 4 years later, second or third time selling, and maybe when I bought my first building there, the question came up again, and we found out, yes, it was dedicated to the city of Pataska, however, it was never accepted. And we didn't know, I didn't know you had to ask 2 questions when you called the engineer, but I know that now, so.
Now
yeah.
I do.
And we knew there was a punch list, so anyways, I know nobody was here, I wasn't there, new administration, everything, and the original developers passed away, so, you know, we can't find anything out there, and as the state was in bankruptcy and the places were sold, but, so I approached BJ several times, approached Alan, we met out there, we met with the, I forget your street directors, Vrabel.
Street superintendent, yeah.
Superintendent, we met there and, you know, I didn't even know that the city was plowing the street, but I understand the city does plow the snow off the street. And, the resident, or not the residents, but the homeowner, the building owners, which there's 3 buildings in there, they take care of everything else that's there. So at that point, there was a punch list, it was the street light, it was pulling some cattails, and something came up, and those 2 items I thought, you know, just, I think I could talk to the 10 building owners in there and get them to pitch in to split those 2 items, because they're pretty, you know, probably under $2,000 to do all of that. But then something came up about microsurfacing the road, and that's when I kind of drew the line and just said, you know, I'm not an expert in street, I don't even know what microsurfacing is. I'm assuming it's what you put on Hadley's Mill Road or something like, or,
It's a little bit different, but
okay, well anyways, it doesn't matter. I don't know what that is, and I really didn't want to learn what that was, to represent 10 building owners and say, you know, I'm gonna go out and get a price and we're gonna do this, and hopefully the city accepts it. So it just was out of my comfort zone. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought that, you know, trying to sell this to 10 building owners, and, you know, get them to pay for this for something, they didn't know when they bought the property. They were saying, we do a title search, and obviously it doesn't come up in that. Just the more I thought about it, I just thought that this isn't our fault. You know, I'm certainly not saying it's any of your fault, but I'm just saying when the city became a city, I think they inherited this, and I think the city should take over the responsibility of the road from here on going forward. So that's just my opinion. And so that's why I'm here today. They suggested, Alan and BJ suggested I come to the street committee, and I missed it last month or something, and so here I am. And that's just my 2 cents worth, so. I'd like to get it resolved, because sooner or later it's gonna need repair, and I don't know what's gonna happen with it going down the road, but, yeah, we're getting some there's a new building just sold in the back, so we're getting some new owners in the park, and I think they have the right to know that they really don't. I talked to the owner of Elite Heating the other day, who owns 2 buildings there, and he was kinda shocked to hear that. He said, I didn't know that. I just assumed it was a city street, so. That's what I know. I'd ask you that please take the road over, the city take the road over, so that's it for me.
Thanks, Mark.
So, Alan, when we look, so this is similar to other situations we have in the city, where there are streets that people have all along thought are city-owned, or belong to the city, they have a sign with a street name, and they've been plowed, or, you know, whatever, for however long, and then we come along and find out that that is indeed not the case, that the city does not own them. Mr. Mayor, the water cooler was taken away. Sorry. He's back there, I couldn't even
We're changing to a new company.
wandering about.
There's a hose out back.
So, anyhow, so do we know, like, with this particular road, is it, owned by everyone? Like, is there a little piece of it owned, what is the right of way look, I mean, what do we
So-
know?
I don't know if there's right of way established or not, I don't remember, I don't think that there was, so I think it's just a piece of property in and of itself almost, would be my guess. I don't know that we've plowed it, it's about it's probably only 300 feet long, it's not terribly long, it's basically a cul-de-sac with businesses all around it. And a microsurface, for reference, is kind of an emulsion with a sand material that acts to seal the surface, a little bit smaller than what a chip seal would be, quite a bit smaller, so it looks more like asphalt.
So, just hypothetically, if we were to take it over, however you wanna phrase it, what does that entail for us?
Not terribly much, just, kind of adding it to our list of streets to do maintenance on, which I think initially the city, I would imagine, would plan to do that upon acceptance of, taking care of the punch list for the developer, which is, I guess typical for, any kind of development project. They would complete that and then we would take it over. I guess playing the devil's advocate is, where do you draw that line between what the developer should have done and what they don't do and what we take over?
Right, well, that's what I'm trying to determine, because this certainly isn't the only road in the city like this, or street, or whatever, that where, you have people, because we have, it's been an issue in the past couple of years where we have residents who have thought that their street was owned or maintained by the city, and then all of a sudden we're told it is not. So where does this,
This one's a little bit different, I think. I think the two you're talking about that I know of at least are Davis, which was all easements, and basically they built themselves a driveway and thought somebody somewhere thought it was cities, and of course it's not, it's just an easement. And then the one off of Cleveland, which is Meadow Way.
Meadow Way.
And that one is more or less just an easement as well. It was a driveway. So this one I don't think is in right of way or easement, and that's the only real difference that
Okay.
I could state. You said?
I would say, this one, I don't know the history of those other two, but this one, the park was developed and constructed in a manner that the intention was always for the city to accept it as public infrastructure like we would any subdivision or commercial property. So that was always the intention of this. It didn't happen, as Mark, talked about the history, why it didn't happen, but that was certainly always the intention of this. The construction of the road, it's asphalt, it has the base, those construction plans would have had to have been approved by engineering, whenever it was constructed. So, from a structural standpoint, I have to assume that it's pretty sound.
I would agree with that.
Is this Jefferson Park that I sent you the pictures? Inspection, the issues.
That sounds right. That was a while back, I think.
Yes.
So I haven't looked at this in a while.
Yes, but I have those pictures of what
Okay,
were the deficiency the inspectors were saying at the time,
okay.
if you need those.
do you guys have any questions about this particular street? So Alan, what is your I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't have any.
Okay, what's your recommendation? I mean, is this something that you guys propose we add to the ramp, and then at what point, where do we put it? Or does it fall in that, if that's the case?
Okay, well, I hadn't prepared a recommendation, and BJ wants to talk, so if you wanna go ahead and that'd be
Well, I'll say my recommendation is for the city to accept it as public infrastructure. Certainly it is a commercial area that we have businesses in. The intention of it was to always have it accepted. As far as needing maintenance, we would probably go in there, crack seal it at first. I'm not totally familiar with, condition of the, surface course of asphalt, but I feel like it's probably several years away from really needing paved.
Yes.
It's only a couple 100 feet long. And again, I just go back, the intention always was for this to be accepted as a public right of way.
Well, just looking here, it doesn't look like it's much to take care of, it's very short. But before we accept it, would you be able to go out there, have someone go out there and inspect it and see what needs done before we?
We did take a look, it's been a couple months back. Basically, we went along with the original recommendations of the punch list, which was some sort of seal coat, I believe, on that road. So that's what we looked at, was a seal coat to bring it up with the original suggestion,
Okay.
recommendation.
Go ahead, BJ.
Procedurally, if we did proceed with seeking acceptance of this, we would prepare legislation like we do for any public infrastructure for consideration by council.
I think I mean, not that I'm against doing that, but before, as a committee, I would be comfortable asking council to move forward with that or make a recommendation to the whole of council. I would wanna know a little bit more about what work it would entail. And I understand it's not very long, so it wouldn't probably be terribly costly.
Sure.
But if we could get an idea, so we could just bring more detail when we have that discussion.
Sorry. I think what we could do is take a look, see what it needs, you know, now, if anything, and then, you know, ultimately what it would cost when the day comes to repay it, mill and pave it. And I think that would be good to know. Ultimately, what is the total amount, you know, if it's $20,000 or whatever to repay, but we know we're taking on that financial liability to do it.
Agreed. So, I think that's
Yep.
the plan.
Yep, I will take a look, we'll put together a summary of now, and what we think it would cost you, and actually, we'll be ready to repave that and provide that.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You in touch, Mark?
Thanks. Thanks, sir.
Raise me on this. That's a really good aim.
Okay, and then if we wanted to stay on, item number 3, resident issues, since we're
Yes.
there.
Let's just knock it out.
Okay, the second one is 180 Vine Street. This is Mr. Jim Helpich. He called me here a couple months back and said, hey, my basement's flooding in this house that he owns, and said he thinks that a storm sewer runs underneath of the house. We said, okay, we went out and checked it out, had a camera and a locator go out, and sure enough, there's a tile that runs directly underneath this house. So, of course, it's not an easement, it's an old field tile, old an old field tile, and not an easement, so that adds another level of what do we do. I don't think we want an easement. He'd offered that as a solution at a cost, but I don't think we want an easement for a pipe underneath the house. So then that would be what to do moving forward. It has caused his basement to flood a few different times. So I did give you a copy of the email. It's the last item in the packet there. I had summarized everything and he responded to that. Basically, he's looking to get, one ideal solution would be to move the tile. It's, technically not a city tile because it's not in an easement, but ideally we would be able to move it to an alley, which is adjacent, and take care of that, but I think we're a little ways from having the money and being ready to do that. So he's requested, basically $500 a piece for each time the basement has flooded in the recent past, basically this year, so it's 3 times. And then cost for any time it floods in the future, or he's planning to dig up the tile and block it at the edge of his property, which, because there's no easement, he has a legal right to do. So that would put us in a predicament where there'd be flooding upstream. So not an ideal situation. This tile does run underneath several other pieces of private property. We don't know exactly where it goes, but we found it in another location, and the direction it runs, it definitely runs under at least a couple other pieces of private property. So ideally, we would have a solution to move it eventually anyways, now that we know where it's at. But in the short term, that's a little more challenging.
Let me try to remember. I'm being recorded. Well, I don't respond well to extortion, which is what I would call that, quite simply. So, no, I would not personally agree to pay him anything. It's his property, he can do whatever he wants with it. How do we fix this without, where do we go to another spot? What do we do?
So we would have to run a little bit of tile to the south, maybe 50 to 100 feet, and then east for a couple thousand feet probably. So it would be a reasonable undertaking to get it down the alley and then find out where it goes. The problem is it runs all the way to the river, which is somewhere between a quarter mile and a half mile, and we don't know where exactly it goes through there, so we could try and do a small project and work around this property and dump into what's existing. Ideally, long-term solution would be to get it all somewhere in easement. That would be fairly expensive.
Well, and so here, I mean, just thinking of this along the same lines as we've dealt with all of the other surprise flooding, drainage, whatever issues that have fallen on the street committee. That I would say, if we could find a reasonable short-term solution and then add it to our list of things, that needs to be, now where, I'm trying to remember, this doesn't fall into the same group that's not along where the school is and such.
No, this is,
That's a whole different.
That's the library.
yeah, just south of the library.
Okay.
So it's like the next intersection past the library, and there's two white houses on the corner there, and on the right are the brick apartments.
I know exactly which one you're talking about now.
So, and then for a short term, I think we would struggle to try and get it in this year yet with the weather we have and
Right.
the amount of time left.
But with that being said, which is fine, how much more will it flood, and how much more money will he want the city? I mean, and I know you're saying don't pay, but how much are you going to hear from this? So like your time is valuable, and I know you can't get it in, so I mean, how much will you have to deal with if we don't get it in?
There will likely be some flooding upstream of that. Where that will go and how that'll affect us, I don't know yet. A lot of it would probably flood on the west side and wouldn't be able to get over Vine Street, because it's gonna have no outlet. So it would cause, I would definitely say it's gonna cause us a problem.
Well, and here's my thing, is this a property that he rents to someone?
Yes,
Okay, so we have residents who are in there being affected,
correct,
so their belongings are being affected.
correct.
Okay, so that would be where my concern is
Mhm.
and my focus. A blanket $500 every time something floods is absurd. I mean, if you get an electric bill, you want it itemized, you don't pay, for your order through the drive-through without knowing what items have been charged, that's nonsense.
So to clarify, he stated that the $500 per on the previous ones wouldn't have actually covered his cost, but he's good with that. And then moving forward, he would want whatever that cost is. Just to clarify, that's what
I have
he's
no idea what
requesting.
his cost was, I have no idea if they went through an insurance company, if there was some kind of mitigation on the insurance company's part, no. But we do need to make sure that the people who live in that house, if we could find a way to stop them from suffering
Is
further
it both
damage.
houses or just the one?
Just the one that I'm aware of, and he
To the
believes that
corner.
if he cuts it off upstream, that they won't have problem. His problem will go away. That's what he believes.
Is it the
if he-
one on the corner?
Yes.
And she's a single mom of 3 military kids. So I'm sure that she's.
Well, I'm sure there's lots
it's
of
hard.
people I just, we'll reasonably handle this the same way we would handle any other flooding issue that we have. I mean, if we don't have the resources or the means to even get it done this year. We're not blanket paying anything for anything. I mean, if there was something presented that showed an outline of real damages, I think it would be a different discussion. But just they'll take this or that. So, what is, if we could get to it, what is the short-term solution? Is there a short-term solution?
That's the problem. There's no good area to take that water to other than where this tile goes unless we constructed a new storm sewer down the alley. So yeah, if he cuts this off, then we're just gonna have water sitting there, probably on the west side of Vine Street.
Right, well, and I'm not even saying if he cuts this off, I'm saying if this were a situation that was presented to us and we had to find a short-term solution to try to stop the flooding there without it impacting other people, what would we do? Or is there a way?
I don't see anything other than rerouting a storm sewer. I don't think there's a way to take, besides trying to pump or something like that around it,
Right.
which I don't think is a very good solution.
Which is very, that's, so the constructing of
Um,
something else down the alley would last us how long?
I
Given that
indefinitely.
there's so
I mean,
many
it's just
other,
like- Yeah, I'd say indefinitely. I mean, any infrastructure that we do is gonna be, you know, I think the storm sewer lifespan's around 30 to 40 years when you construct a new one, so I would anticipate we'll get that out of it and just have the normal maintenance.
but that doesn't take care of the rest of the houses with all the tile under it.
That tile would probably just be abandoned in place, so we would not create any more flooding, it would just stay there and we would go around it, basically.
But that sounds like the long-term solution as well.
Well, it's very similar. The short term would be doing just that first block, the long term would be doing all the way to the river.
I see. Is there, any way we can get some kind of an idea what the cost would be
I can start to look at that.
for just the, just that alley?
Yeah.
So we can see, and then put that, and take it and compare it to all of our other list of drainage issues and see where it falls on that priority list.
Just trying to run some numbers in my head real quick. I'm guessing there's at least 1,000, if not probably 1,000 feet of pipe at $50 a foot, so 50,000 if we did it outside scope. That's probably low. I would estimate close 50 to 100,000 to do outside scope. We could do it in-house, but we wouldn't have the manpower to do it this
Right.
year.
That's a huge amount. What is your recommendation, or what were your thoughts before you?
Let's go with recommendation,
Well,
not thoughts.
that's a tough one, because obviously if he cuts this off, I think what he wants to hear is that we're going to do something as soon as possible, which isn't, I don't think anything that we can do is gonna be soon enough. So if he cuts that off, it may or may not solve his problem, but it will definitely create a flooding problem upstream, which actually may flood into his house and make things worse, I don't know. But, so, I mean, yeah, I'd like to put a new storm sewer in down the alley, but I don't know, I can't see a way to get that done as fast as what he wants.
Well, this isn't him aside,
Yes,
what he wants
yes.
for us and what is reasonable and what we can do is what I'm looking at. And if you have, there's 3 small children that live in that house?
No, there are 3 military children, she's alone.
Oh, so she's not there with 3 children, she
No,
lives
she's
in
got
that-
3 children all in the military.
I see, okay.
So she's alone.
So we put it on the list, we do what we would do with any other thing, and we see where it falls, and then we go with it. We can't control what
The
some of these
list.
actions are, so and if he does something that may cause flooding or damage someplace else, he may be liable for that from another party, I don't know.
Being that it's subsurface drainage and the way Ohio drainage law works, I would doubt that he would be.
Do we have any, I know nothing about what you do, so I'm not even going to attempt, and this is going to likely come out really ignorant. The tiles are they going down Vine? And like, is that a thing where the tiles go down where's the water?
So the
Coming
water
from
in this
it.
area basically runs west to east. There's
I see.
basically an old field that's behind the library.
Right,
to the side.
right.
That water from that field comes across a couple pieces of private property and then crosses Vine Street and continues across private property all the way to
So
the
you wanna
road.
take it to the alley, behind the house?
To the south of the house.
Right,
correct.
okay. So you have to extend it,
So we would
kind
have
of
to
reroute it,
run
like
a
elbow
short
it
piece
around.
to the south, run to the east, and then
Rehook it.
potentially connect it back up on High Street. So basically from Vine to High, assuming, which I would think it wouldn't be a problem, as long as there's elevation to capture that extra 50 feet, which I would think that there would be.
Okay.
And right now, this particular residence is the only one
that I know of.
That
is a
you know
problem.
of, that it's been reported to us?
Yes.
Okay. So, maybe we need to set up a time to get together and look at the drainage issues again,
And add it to the list, like you said.
add it to the list and see where it falls.
So my only question with that, I guess, if we do have a flooding situation, if he does go through with this, I still don't know what to do with that water. I guess we can figure that out when we get there.
We'll cross
we get
that
there.
bridge when we get there. We'll do, I mean, but we can't deal in what ifs. We can't deal in, I mean,
So, I guess what can we do right now?
nothing.
What, I mean, is there
Nothing that we have the
anything
money
can
or
do?
resources to do right now.
That's the problem, to get a contractor out here to do it, I don't think we got the money in the budget.
Well, and quite frankly, do we have another drainage problem that's more serious, that's higher priority, that should have the resources first? That's what we're looking at. BJ?
No, you just hit the nail on the head, what I was gonna say, we're talking $50,000 to $100,000 for a drainage issue. What can we do right now? We can't do anything, we can't fix this as quickly as he wants to, we can't bump others because of this. We have people who have been waiting for years and years and years for drainage issues, and we're finally starting to chip away at those, that's represented in the budget. As you see the CIP items, I think we need to identify this, make it a CIP item and plug it in when it fits into the budget, what somebody plans to do or whatever. We'll deal with that when it happens. I just don't, there's nothing that we can do fast enough to alleviate this gentleman's concerns. We have plenty more drainage issues to deal with, and we have started to identify those, and we have money budgeted for those. So in order to do this, we'd have to bump one of those probably.
Is it fair, I'm sorry,
No, I'm done.
is it fair to say that we appreciate him bringing it to our attention, and we agree that there is an issue, and we are adding it to our list, and we will seek budget approval, if you will, the 2020 budget to help him alleviate this issue?
I doubt that will fit into the 2020 budget. That's gonna be on the long-term CIP.
Or that will alleviate.
I think that, with our drainage issues now,
Is this as dire as the resident is making it out to be?
Evidently, the basement, the tile does run underneath the house, they have a basement drain that's connected into it. We had suggested him put a backflow preventer on that to keep it from coming up into the house. I don't know where he's gone with that, but,
So there are some things that he can do to make
Potentially.
this, oh.
how many, is this the first time this has been brought to us?
yeah, that's, about 2 months ago was the first time it was brought up to me. So within about a month, we had it cameraed and videoed, found the solution. We've talked a couple times, and this is the first meeting that we've been able to have all the information that,
So there's been 3 flooding events.
in the past year or so, that's what I'm told, yes.
Until he realized where the tile was, so.
Evidently, yeah, he had
Whatever.
suspicion it was under there. I don't know where that suspicion came from, but it was accurate as the empirical evidence determined.
All right.
Go ahead, BJ.
Just one more thing, keep in mind, this is not in an easement dedicated to the city, so ultimately, I can argue that it is not a city storm tile. If he cuts it off, it creates a drainage issue, and again, we put it in line with the others and see when it can be taken care of.
Yeah, that's, proceed with how we would any other, let's look at our, this sounds like it's on the major list, and, see where our major list is at. And what's on there and where this falls into Todd's Middle, wherever. And hopefully we can get a better time frame. In the meantime, encourage that property owner, for the sake of his renter, to put the backflow stop thing on.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess the only other thing, we'll take a look at it then. We'll try and put some numbers to it, do some investigation, find out the extent of it, see if it's something that we can do in-house, obviously not this year, but even next year, to save some money if it's a small enough job that we can do.
Yeah, because if it's something we can do in-house that, saves us some money, and not just saves us money, but it allows us to get to it a little faster. which would be ideal,
Yes,
you know, for the individual that has to live in that house,
yes.
so.
Okay, back up to, item number 2, the 2020 ramp then.
Yes.
Okay, that's the other, packet that I handed there. This is also, this is the same information I think I sent out last week, or the week before. The first page is the summary of, what we've got here. This was the highlighted items from the initial list that we talked about of about 15 streets. I did talk about at one point trying to have a higher budget, for the streets, program next year. However, I did not build that into the budget. I only built in the 650 that we've done for the past few years. So I did put those into 2 columns, the base bid items being, Mill Street from Columbia Road over to the bridge, all of Blacks Road that's in the corporate limit, Creek Road from basically, Municipal Park to the corp limit, and then Pat Hagen Drive, which has, deteriorated a fair amount from the construction on there. And that would all fit within the base bid. The other 3, I would propose to put into, go ahead and do the design on those, do alternate bids, and see what kind of prices we get and see what kind of savings we have. I do anticipate savings from the 2019 budget, from being able to close different purchase orders and such, but we're not to a point yet where we can actually close those with projects still ongoing. So, happy for any feedback on that, if there's anything we should do different.
Where does the, engineering at the intersection of Broad and Summit fall into the, did we talk about the first step?
That would be its own project.
Okay,
not
so
as
that'd
part
be
of the
separate out of the ramp, okay.
Correct,
I
and
got you.
we budgeted, I can tell you how much, but for next year will be engineering, following year will be right of way, and, funding sources, third year will be construction.
Okay.
I wanna say it's about 150,000 next year that we budgeted for engineering.
Columbia, yeah, Columbia is definitely needing it too.
I'd really love to do Columbia Road this year. It's starting to have signs of deterioration, or
It
next year.
is,
And
yeah.
the longer we wait, the worse the more it's gonna cost, but
I mean, I think this looks good, this falls right in line with the things that we've been talking about, you know, as the years gone on. Do you guys have any,
No, this is, looks good to me.
PJ?
Just one thing I wanted to say, as far as the alternates, I do think the Mill Street alternate, Main to Bridge should be the top priority, just so we can get all of Mill Street done and not have them on different life cycles.
Agreed, I would agree. With our potential budget increasing, I mean, that would leave room for us, I mean, I think it's safe to budget on the same amount as we have in the past. And, you know, and then if there is additional money from income tax or whatever else, then we can just use that to hopefully, you know, maybe get even more in than what some of our alternates are, I don't know.
that would be ideal, and I know that, over the next 5 years for the CIP, I've tried to ramp up the ramp budget, based on what the financials look like, but for now, it's stuck at that 650. And I think that's wise, and I think we will have some savings, and hopefully those alternates come in good, and we can do something.
Agreed. All right, excellent. Okay.
Okay, moving on to item 4, project updates. The 2019 ramp, all work is complete on that. I know we do have savings. I don't know what that number is yet. We're working out the final change orders and quantities and everything. We're really close, so I hope to have numbers on that soon, but we definitely do have some savings. And I'll go ahead and mention as well the 2018 ramp, because of finishing up Headley's Mill and not getting the chip seal done. We're in the same point on that. We definitely have savings. I wanna say between the two, it's around 100,000, but I don't have those numbers yet, so we'll take that with a grain of salt. But all that is finished up and in the process.
All right.
Moving on to Oak Meadow Drive. In general, things are going pretty well on Oak Meadow Drive. There's a couple small items. So the first is the sidewalk. Of course, we did decide we wanted to do the sidewalk, which was an extra $34,000. We've talked about doing the assessment and such, but we haven't looked at where that money's gonna come from in the immediate time. So I looked at that the other day. We do have savings in the 205, that's the permissive budget, where we had Mill Street culvert and Columbia Road culvert, with budgets for $50,000 apiece. Partnered with a local contractor, got to do them both for under $10,000. So we have that money available in the 205. So I anticipate with the committee's support, bringing a resolution to council at the next council meeting to appropriate the money for the sidewalks.
I think that's great.
So you're-
The second item with Oak Meadow.
Order.
The second item with Oak Meadow is because the way that project developed, we took out a lot of the contingency because of the cost. We have run into a couple of items, pipes and stuff that we didn't know were there, that we've tied in. There's a small amount extra for that work. We think we're gonna have some savings, but I can't figure out what those savings are yet with the project still going on. So when we did the supplemental earlier this year, supplemental 4336, we had appropriated, I think that's the right term, we appropriated $115,000 in that supplemental to cover the additional cost that was spent. However, we only used $104,000 of that, so we have $10,000 left in that supplemental that was never actually put into a purchase order for that project. So the second part of that resolution I'd like to do for Oak Meadow is take that $10,000 that we already have in the supplemental and appropriate it to the project so we can cover these minor overages. It's definitely less than $10,000 right now. I think that $10,000 will cover it, and we've already effectively budgeted in the supplement.
No, I think that's great. I think that's absolutely great.
Okay? And aside from that, on Oak Meadow, sidewalks are happening this week. If that all happens and the weather's good, they're hoping to pave next week. So fingers crossed for that, and we'll take it as it comes.
All right, after the paving, we're how close to resolution on that then altogether?
Let's see, after paving, they will need to do, so they'll pave the main line first, and then they'll come back and do the driveways, and then they'll do restoration work to create the ditches to match, the driveways and the pavement, and some catch basins need adjusted to grade so that they're appropriate. Should still be done this year. The paving's a big thing. I know the plants are very busy right now, but it's looking good.
Good, okay, and that'll get that, at least maybe the traffic flow back to
Yes.
normal for those folks,
Yes.
so that's number one, okay.
Yeah, total restoration, seeding and stuff will probably, I'm sure we're gonna have to reseed in the spring to get that all to take grass, but
Right,
we should be substantially complete this year.
excellent, okay.
Quickly,
Yeah,
with the Oak Meadow Drive project, Pat Haven Drive, like you mentioned, is pretty messed up. Even the parts that they haven't dug into have gotten a lot worse.
Yes.
Are they going to repair even some of the stuff that they didn't touch?
Not typically, so we went ahead and did, there was one big pothole in the street department, so we will take care of those, as needed. So we did one, we're kinda trying to let them get out of the way, then we can address the whole street.
Okay. Okay.
and
Before
we'll get
that.
it taken care of next year in the winter, so.
Yes.
Okay.
Moving on to the Pataskla Safe Travel Plan, phases 1 and 2. This is a similar, the first thing is we've had a couple overages. One, the control box for the controller did not have a disconnect switch, which is not a good scenario to be able to cut power to it. So that's one item. There's a little bit of additional paving, there's a little bit of additional sidewalk, the way things worked out. So there's a small amount of overage on that project. Again, when we did the supplemental earlier this year, we put $95,000 in to cover the cost of both projects, phase 1 and 2, but we only used $84,000 of it, so there's a little better than $10,000 remaining in that supplemental. I'd like to take a resolution to appropriate that remaining money to the project at the next council meeting if the committee support for that.
Yes, yes, that's great.
Okay, great. Other than that, I know the controller just came in, so that project and the ped heads are in. They should be out soon. I don't have an update on a final date, but it is moving along as fast as possible. And then phase 3 of the Safe Travel Plan, we have authorized engineering. Survey should be starting on that before the end of the month.
Nice.
Moving on to the Taylor Road Drainage Project. Minutes. survey is complete on that, so they're working on base mapping, and I have a 30% progress meeting scheduled for this week. So they'll show me their rough alignment, make sure we're all tracking in the same direction here, and then should be good to move forward on that. Any questions on that one? And then the Taylor Road Path Project, that will be scheduled as soon as possible. We're just finishing up the paperwork on getting the purchase order and everything signed. So that should happen here, relatively near future as well.
How long will it take them to get out there once we give them the go? Did they say, are we,
I don't know what their schedule is.
okay.
Yeah. I've talked to them, they know that it's approved and we're gonna be moving forward with it, but they didn't have a schedule. They said they'd give me a schedule once we had everything.
Well, they don't trust us.
Trust but verify, I think.
Okay.
And then that's it for project updates, unless there's any other project questions.
Oh, the light timing and the intersection survey and,
Expecting early November, they are running a little bit behind schedule on that one. I think they're doing a good job with it, which is good news, but it's a little bit behind schedule.
okay.
I called him last week and gave him the prod. I said, I'm telling him end of November, beginning of November, so that's when I'm gonna have it, right, so. Moving on to drainage issues, Monarch Drive, that's a similar one. We're finishing up the purchase order, getting them the paperwork. Once we get that to them, then we'll get that scheduled. So that should happen here within the next month or so, I would anticipate. And then I'll just mention the Mill Street culvert, that went really well. Got that replaced, new concrete there, and they did a really good job with that job.
Excellent.
The next item is the Public Service Department 2020 budget. I didn't have anything specifically prepared on that. I know we've talked about that before, but wanted to leave it on there in case there were any questions, comments, concerns.
The only question I would have is, as far as the, ask for the additional staff, how is the, proposal, if you will, looking?
Working on it.
Okay. Fair enough. You guys have any other questions with that?
And that is all I have. Unless there's any other items you'd like to talk about.
Go ahead, BJ.
I was just gonna mention, as far as the 2020 ramp, our desire is to begin, and you may have mentioned this, begin engineering design this year on it to get it bid
Yeah.
out as soon as possible
Absolutely.
in 2020.
Thank you for bringing that up. We had done an RFQ last year. 3 had submitted on it, and GPD did it last year. Actually, we did that 3 years ago. We've used all 3 of them. GPD did a really good job last year, and we were gonna go ahead and go with them again this year, if that's, if the committee's okay with that. It's less than 50,000, so there's no bidding requirement.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
BJ?
I would say anticipate that resolution on November 4th.
Yes.
Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to ask about was the email that BJ had sent for the TS Tech situation.
Yeah, we have not met with them yet. TS Tech, from the sounds of it, does have a desire to revisit using that access off of Taylor Road as a full-service access.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, you know, they came in, got approval for their cross-dock or whatever they call it. The approval for the access remained as emergency only. They paved it, and they're saying, now that we paved it, we'd like to start using it for full service. Certainly willing to hear them out, see if there's any new information, but as the administration stands now, it is an emergency access only.
Well, and what is the, if they're having, you know, traffic flow problems, have they looked at any, you know, upgrades to their current exit onto Broad?
They haven't done anything,
That's
to
what
my
I would
knowledge.
recommend for them,
Yeah.
to
Oh.
save their
Sorry, go ahead.
money on legal counsel and maybe upgrade their current intersection.
I'm not trying to be rude, but if my memory serves me correctly, it wasn't the original conversation that we expected this to happen. That we had discussed that we anticipated that this exit would be used for general traffic, even though does my memory, is that right? That, like, I know it's been a while, but I feel like we had the conversation that it should only be used for
When this
certain, and
came
they
to us
swore
several
that they would
years
only use
ago,
it.
and you were asking it to be emergency, we were very clear at the time that we were reluctant for that because then, you know, it's like, oh, you made the team, but now you wanna play too, you know, so
Yeah,
we were pretty sure we were gonna get to this point. With our current infrastructure, Taylor Road does not support that. It's not safe, and it's just not safe.
yeah.
And essentially just giving people a way to bypass traffic signals, which is straight into a residential area, which is no good.
You're right, nothing has changed on Taylor Road to accommodate the additional traffic, so we stay steadfast that it's emergency only.
The only other thing I'd mention, I do believe that we offered to them, like, okay, so the new crosstalk is in the city, that they could potentially move the gate back so that they didn't have to cross traffic, and that they could use the access for the part that's in Pataskla now through that access. I think we had talked about that, I don't recollect if that was a viable option or not.
It was not, and it remains an emergency access only.
Excellent.
Yeah, 'cause I don't remember anything about that.
Again, there would have to be some very different circumstances that we're presented with for us to even make a
I
recommendation
mean,
to change
if
from
TS
that.
Tech is willing to, you know, help us pay for the drainage project and widening of Taylor Road and the intersection of the Rodden Taylor, you know, improvements, outside of serious infrastructure upgrades to Taylor Road, I don't see that happening. Anything else? Alright, motion to adjourn.
Second, first, second, I always mess it up. Second, yes.
So moved.
Okay, Kathy, roll please.
Carter?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
I mean, I'll be back.
You're, okay, real quick, on those. My questions are not real quick.